Hey guys, it is Spooky Noodles, and I am here with a top 5 video. I got this idea from Well Red Beard, and so go check out his video. I'll leave it in the description. I'll link in the description. And yeah, I told him that it was a good idea, and I'm probably gonna steal it from him, and I am. So what's the? Well, you've already know by the title of the video, but this will be a books that inspired me to read. And yeah, and if you don't know, I'm relatively new to reading. I started reading, I want to say, at the end of 2019. I've always been reading creepypastas and listening to creepypastas. Well, I was listening to creepypastas for the longest time. And one day I decided, I could do this, so I started writing them. And then I started reading them. And then I moved my way to reading the real books. And yeah, ever since then it just kind of blossomed. But reading kind of stemmed from school. I loved reading, but I didn't really do it like a lot until, I didn't do it for fun until later on in life. But there were a few books that I knew I liked to read, I just didn't do it, I didn't take the time or use the money to buy books. I just didn't feel like I was a great reader because I got a reading disability. So I was always told I wouldn't be able to read or write or tie my shoes, and here I am doing all this stuff. But basically what I'm trying to say is that I was told I wasn't a reader, so I believed it, and now I know better. I love reading, and yeah, even though my sister says I don't love reading because she says that I always complain about the books I read, and it's true, I do. But yeah, but these are 5 books that inspired me to read. We're gonna start off with this book, Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. Now this is the first and one of the only books I've read. This one literally looks like it's been through a fire, so it is gross. It is a gross copy of this book, but I like the cover. I gave my grandpa the better version, the better copy. Me and my grandpa haven't read anything yet, but we will eventually. He's reading iRobot, and I'm gonna be taking that copy from him as soon as he's done with it. So, but yeah, Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451. I read this in school, and I was one of the first kids to finish the book. Once I got into it and started reading, I couldn't stop. I remember just loving this book to death. And if you don't know what it's about this guy who's a firefighter, and he learns that firefighters used to put out fires, not start them. And he learns this through books that they're burning. And it's a whole little thing. I barely remember the ending, but very good book. Very good book. One of the first books I read in school that I actually liked. No, this is the first book I read in school that I actually liked. So, bravo to my teachers for letting me read this. Next, let's do this one. The Giver by Lois Lowry. Now this one, very interesting book. You don't see there, it says John Newbery Medal Award or whatever. It deserves it, whatever that medal means. And I'll read the back to you because I'm not really good at explaining this book. So I'll just read the synopsis for you guys. Jonas's world is perfect. Everything is under control. There is no war or fear or pain. There are no choices. Every person is assigned a role in the community. When Jonas turns 12, he is singled out to receive special training from the Giver. The Giver alone holds the memories of the true pain and pleasure of life. Now it's time for Jonas to receive the truth. There is no turning back. That's the Giver. I read this one in school, and it hit me really hard. I never thought a book in school would make me tear up, but I remember tearing up a little bit. This was a great book. If you haven't read it, it's an amazing book. But yeah. All right, next is another one I read in school, and that's Flowers for Algernon. Now, if you don't know who I am as a person, I have a reading disability, and I was in special ed or special needs classes. I had an IEP, and I just wasn't the smartest kid. I had special needs, and I was in these special ed classes. And so this book really affected me because it's about this guy who goes through these tests and to become smarter. So he starts off really dumb, you know, and I just took this like to heart, this story. He starts off really dumb, the drug works and makes him smarter, and then things go awry. There's this mouse called Algernon, and this is why it's called Flowers for Algernon. I don't know if I said that title or not. By who was it by? Daniel Keyes. So there's this mouse called Algernon, and he takes the same drug, and the mouse goes from not being able to finish a maze, finishing the maze in like no time. So the mouse is getting smarter and smarter and smarter. So they try the drug on a human. Well, later on, the mouse decreases and becomes dumber, and then eventually dies. So you progressively see that happen to the main character. He becomes like the peak of how smart he can be. And he has a girlfriend. His life's great now, and he's trying his hardest to figure out what happened to the mouse for it to become dumb again, dumber than before, and then die. And he wants to solve it before it happens to him, but unfortunately, well, I'm definitely spoiling this book for you guys, but I don't think he makes it. I can't remember the ending. I think it ends with him like writing a bunch of words down. It's just a sad book. It's a very sad book. This book made me cry, and there's a common theme here. Books that make me cry are like some of my favorite books of all time. And yeah, Flowers for Algernon. Alright, next is a book that I personally read myself. It's my first horror book. And I read this when I was, I want to say 15 years old. And I was in high school, so this book hit me pretty hard in the right place in the right time. And that's Carrie by Stephen King. It doesn't really say anything on the cover there, but the spine says Carrie. And it's by Stephen King. You can't read it, but it says Stephen King on there. And you probably know the synopsis for Carrie, so I won't get into it. But it's about this girl, and she has powers. That's all I'm going to say. Good book. Alright. Now, I have one more book, for this Top Friday, and then I'm going to name an honorable mention that I didn't name on this list, but it means the world to me, and I just don't own a copy of it anymore. If I do own a copy, I have no idea where it is, but it's one of my favorite books of all time that is not horror related. My favorite non-horror related book. And I'll get into that in a second, but first, I want to get to the book that got me back into reading. Now, I started reading a few books, and I got really discouraged very quickly because I didn't think reading was for me because I wasn't enjoying the books I was reading. And the first book I read was, to get me back into reading, which was a horrible book to start off with, was Bats by William W. Johnstone. did not care for that. I made a review, and I just didn't care for it at all. And that's kind of what sparked this channel off, was that review for Bats. That's when I just was so mad and aggravated that I had to make a review to warn people, you know? I felt like I needed to do this, you know? So I got on here, made a review, and then ever since then I've been reviewing and book hauling and all this other stuff. This channel's actually becoming a channel. So so I gotta give props to Bats for starting me off, but that's not the book I'm gonna be talking about. I'm talking about the first book that I read that I actually enjoyed. And that, from my memory, is Richard Lehman's The Traveling Vampire Show. This one got me into coming of age horror, and I absolutely adore this book to death, to the point where I wanted to get a tattoo of it. I still want to get a tattoo, but I'm trying to decide how to do it, because there's so many books that have great scenes in them that I wanted to get tattooed on me, but it's like I want to get like a collage of scenes on my arm, but I don't know how to go about it, you know? But Traveling Vampire, I know there was a few books before this book, like Killer by Peter Tonkin. I read that one and I enjoyed that one. But this is the first one that really I found, like, I read this one and learned that I adore coming of age stories. This one became my favorite coming of age horror story for the longest time. And I absolutely enjoyed this book. It was such a great read. It really got me back. Like, Killer was good by Peter Tonkin, but this book had me continuing reading. I very, very much enjoyed this book. I did not want to stop. I didn't want it to end. And when it ended, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And Richard Lehman did an amazing job with this book. Richard Lehman is a little pervy, but it works because the kids are teenagers, and of course teenagers are going to be horn dogs. But it works in this book because they're horn dogs, they're teenagers. Richard Lehman's writing usually doesn't work for me because he is very perverted, and his perverseness, or whatever you want to call it, just doesn't work for me most of the time. But it worked in this book, and this book is just amazing. Some people say that this is not his best work, and to that I just kind of cock my head a little bit and go, what? Because I thought this book was amazing. This book is one of my favorite books of all time. It's probably number 2 of my all-time list. Fear by Ronald Kelly being number 1. This is written in the first person, so it was very easy for me to read because I read creepypastas and listen to creepypastas all the time. That's kind of how I got into reading. I kind of made my way to reading. Like, I would never read a third-person narrative before, other than in school, until I started reading, like, lately. But this book really helped me out to get into the reading world because of the first-person narrative. It like I said, I listen and read and write creepypastas, so the first-person narrative's always there. And this book helped me transition into books. Excuse me. Because I wasn't used to reading such long books. Like, anything over 200 pages was long for me. And this book, you can see, is not a small book at all. Coming in at 391 pages. Almost 400 pages, let's say. And yeah, it helped me get into the reading world. And I would never have found out about this book if it wasn't for Edward Lorne. And like I said before, I have to thank Edward Lorne for getting me into reading, because I found his YouTube channel one day. I don't know how. I was looking through the circuit on YouTube. I was trying to look up, like, I think I was reminiscing about a book, Carrie, I think. and I think I stumbled upon his Stephen King videos, and then I later on I wanted to know some coming of age stories, and he supplied this book for me. Not supplied it for me, but told me about it. If it wasn't for him, I would have never known about this book. And I enjoyed this book so much. It is such a good book. I own the Cemetery Dance Edition, which I think is right here. Yeah. I own the Cemetery Dance Edition. It's not in the best condition, as you can see. It's like all sideways, but that's what I want tattooed. That little poster. I want that tattooed on me. But I don't. I'm trying to think of how to do this. Like, there's like scenes from a lot of coming of age stories that I want tattooed on me. I would like the Voice of the Night's train scene where they are gonna push a truck to hit a train. I want that to be tattooed on me. I want the scene in Fear where the snake dog hybrid creature rolls an infant's skull to the main character's legs. And then I want, like I said, a scene from this book tattooed on me. There's so many good scenes. I don't even know, probably just a poster of the Traveling Vampire Show's promotional poster. But yeah, that book got me back into reading, and ever since then I haven't been able to stop. I love reading. I love making these videos. And then that's number 5. So these are the 5 books that hold on, let me get them. These are the 5 books that got me back into reading. An honorable mention, and this would be like the most like the book that touched me the most. It made me cry for an hour or more. I cried till I couldn't cry no more. And the book's called A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. That book made me cry. I stained the paper with my tears. The final page, I never thought I could make a book could make me feel as much as that book made me feel. I cried for so long afterwards. There's so many things about that book. Like, I couldn't imagine losing my mother because I love my mom so much. I couldn't imagine letting someone you love go. I've had cancer, so the cancer scenes in the book made me sad. And I thought about what would have happened if I left, and how my family would have had to let me go. It probably hit me more than it probably hit most people. Like, most people would have gotten hit hard, but I got hit twice as hard. Because that book has so many themes that affected me, because I've gone through some of those things. Like, I've had cancer. And then when you learn that Patrick Ness actually picked up a story, like, Patrick Ness is the author, but the original story was written by a woman who died of, I believe, breast cancer. It could have been ovarian, but I think it's breast cancer. Some lady cancer. She died, and she didn't get to finish the book. So Patrick Ness picked it up and finished it for her, and that made me cry. The boy losing his mother at the end of the book made me cry. The cancer itself and the scenes where she's not doing so hot made me cry. Him being bullied, but that being the only normalcy in his life, made me cry. It was just a book that just made me so sad, but it had such a positive message at the same time, but it was so sad. I suggest everyone read A Monster Walks. or A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. I had my mom read it. I think she grieved over the book because, you know, everyone can, you know, letting a mother go is the saddest thought that can cross your mind. Or losing a parent in that matter is the saddest thought you can think of. Unless, of course, you're adopted or something and you don't know your real parents, then maybe, well, I don't know. But, Monster Calls just, it hit me in all the right places. It hit me like all over my body. Like it was a barrage of hits. And it just, I didn't want to read after that. Like I didn't think another book could touch that book. So that's what kind of made me stop reading, because I read a little bit in 2016. I read some Michael Vey books. That was a series where this kid has powers. He can control lightning or something like that. I read a few books in that series and learned that I don't like series. I like standalones. And then I read A Monster Calls, and that made me stop reading, because I never thought a book could top how I felt about that book. And it's not just because the book was good and made me cry and all this other stuff, but I didn't want to, feel emotions like that again. So I was afraid to read another book. But then, like late in 2018, I started reading again. 2019 was the real year where I read. I read from January all the way to December. I read around 50 books, if you count audiobooks. I read everything from horror to literary fiction, which kind of branches out to horror and other genres. But I read a lot of books. Anything that was coming of age related, I tried to pick up and read. I read, I listened to a few books on YouTube, which I know is frowned upon, but I didn't have the money for audiobooks, so anything on YouTube I listened to. I listened to like Mr. Jekyll, or Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I listened to, I'm forgetting the name of the book, The Outsiders, which was a very, very good coming of age story that my sister suggested to me. And my sister isn't much of a reader, so if she finds a book good, then it's a book I have to read, because she doesn't think any books are good. So, if she thinks a book is good, it has to be great, So I listened to that audiobook and it blew me away. That's another book I wish I mentioned, but these 5 books right here are what really got me into reading. From Fahrenheit 451 being the first school book I read, all the way to The Traveling Vampire Show getting me back into reading, to Carrie being my first horror book I ever read. And that's kind of, and not to forget Patrick Ness's A Monster Calls. That book ruined me, absolutely ruined me. And I was very disappointed by the movie, even though it had one of my favorite actors in it, Liam Nelson, or Nielsen. I can't remember how to say his name for the life of me. I love Taken, by the way. I haven't seen Taken 2 or 3, but Taken number 1 was amazing to me. Then there was this movie called, I think, In the Gray or something like that, where he, like, the cover's him all bloodied up and there's wolves in the background, I think. I haven't seen the movie, or if I did, I can't remember, but I just like Liam Nelson, or Nielsen. And he was in A Monster Calls. He was the monster, the voice of the monster, and I just didn't care for it at all. But those are 5 books that got me into reading, or inspired me to read. I'm also a writer, so these books in a sense, are books that got me into writing, but I might make a video on that in its own, because I'm sure there's different books and different stories that got me into writing. Because like creepypastas, really, I listened to a bunch of creepypastas and was like, I can do this. And then I read some books, and I read like a few bad books and was like, I can do this, you know? So, there might be a list of stories that got me into writing. There might be a list for that soon. But this list was books that got me into reading. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys have a spooky day. Yes, a spooky day. And a spooky night. I'll see you in the next video. Bye, guys.
Now I am become death, the destroyer